I have the impression that this is the easy part of the psychodrama setting the space. Well, it can be expensive, but if we can afford it, we will have it. It's not that difficult.
Right.
What is more difficult is the human part of it.
Yeah.
No? So let's start with the director then. Why we start with the director and not with the protagonist?
You have to realize that our practice came out of working with psychotics. Now, why would a psychotic do anything else there than he would do here? Besides, isn't there a director who forms the drama in theater? The only difference is that director's not visible in the performance.
Mm-hmm.
But believe me, he's there watching. And he's going to go to an actor and say, hey, listen, you didn't do that so well. Let's improve on that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So the spirit of the director, and as a matter of fact, there was a problem of the distinction between the therapist and the client. These are roles, or the student. These are distinct roles. Why do we have teachers?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can actually in psychodrama, Moreno's daughter made each of her third graders into the teacher for one day. They did wonderfully. It also disciplined them as students. But they all knew it was only for a day. They clamor for their day. But they learned the distinction between when I'm in front of the class and when I'm sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
So clarity of the role. You're going into the theater, your part is to be part of the group first. Okay, so why a director? Because it's chaotic enough with a director.
Yeah.
No. So that's that's really a non-question of why a director. I mean, I think you can't have drama without a director, somebody to guide it.
Yeah, but my question was not why a director. Why we start talking about a director and not about the protagonist?
Oh, you mean when we were listening to them?
Yeah.
Moreno always started with the director in the listening. Well, if you want to start with the protagonist, fine, but the protagonist doesn't arise until the director has warmed everybody up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the
If
reason.
a patient starts on the, I said, I'm going to be protagonist today, you have to find out whether the rest of the group agrees to that.
Mm-hmm.
The world isn't run for him. So even that is a disciplinary thing, you know. There's one person here. And that, besides, that director could be your therapist. Who else would you want to? Now when we have students, when we used to have students, I used to say, if somebody wanted to be picked to be protagonist, I would say, who among these student directors would you like to have you direct you? They could pick their director. That doesn't happen in therapy. You go to therapy, that's your therapist. If you don't like that therapist, maybe they can find you another, but the roles are clear. Again, we can't mess that up.
But Zerka, when Moreno, if I understood well,
when there's a protagonist who can't be on the psychodrama stage,
mm-hmm.
Moreno has treated them in their own homes, then they become co-directors with the director, protagonist. They teach the director how to direct.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yeah, but at the beginning, in Vienna, for instance, from what I read, psychodrama has not started in a psychiatric arena. It was, but the director was already there. So the idea of the director, from my understanding, comes more from the theater.
Yeah, and he had his improvisational actors. What he did was he gave them a theme, and they enacted it. You see, you have to realize this all developed over the years. The whole process. It was step by step learning. It wasn't until the story with the wife who was so awful at home that he began.
Barbara.
Right. By the way, her picture is on the. She was an actress, and her picture is on one of the stories about Moreno on the web. That became a psychodrama because he directed her in a specific role. But you're right, but you have to realize when we ran open sessions in New York, there were 40, 50 people. We didn't know who they were, who were doing Protagonist. We got volunteers. So, who's going to be the protagonist? Depends on the situation. If, on the other hand, I'm living in a psychiatric hospital and I have a patient who has just had a very bad scene with someone, I might decide in the theater, and I would explain, I said, well, we've had some disturbing events here this afternoon, and we need to learn from those. What can we learn from an actual disturbing event? And then you can pick the protagonist and the auxiliaries. So it is not the person, it is the learning of the event, exploring the event.
Fine. Well, I still wonder. Let me try to get a close on you to check if it's still there. I think it is. But Zerka, the director, when you started in 41, right? You started. How long it took for you to start directing?
It's all in my memoirs.
Yeah, but I haven't read that.
I'll tell you, 7 years. 7 years before I felt confident enough. And I'm very grateful for that long training.
So you started as
Auxiliary ego.
auxiliary ego.
Often as double.
And as a protagonist?
Patients. Was that pretend? Oh, come on. We were staff members. We didn't have time to work on our own stuff. That didn't happen until we began to train students. Then we put ourselves on the stage sometimes. And that was way longer. That was not 1948. I think the first time to be protagonist, well, first of all, our students came full of their own stuff, so they had to be protagonists too. Directors, they had to wait. But if I had a situation that was really hard, boiling hot, then I would ask to be protagonist among the students. When did I have my first? I don't even remember my first psychodrama, to tell you the truth.
And as a director?
No, as a director, I told you, 7 years, 1948. But as a protagonist, it must have been way later, maybe in the 60s, late 60s.
And as a director, how was do you still remember your first experience? How was that?
I did it in front of students who were very competitive with me. And they approved of what I did. So being seen by your peers as able was great. It was like getting a great big bouquet. There was especially one who was very envious of me. You have to realize I was close to Moreno. That caused a lot of jealousy. Everybody wanted to be close to Moreno. So we had a special connection that they didn't have. But I overlooked it, I didn't give a damn, but I knew about this particular one very clearly because it was evident. Yeah, I mean, you'd have to be deaf, dumb, and blind not to see it, you know.
Was he very critical towards
Generally,
you or not?
Yes. I went up to him once after this incident, my directing, and I cleared the air. I said, I know, it's years later, I know you once didn't think much of me as a psychodramatist. But that was when he started to bring his students to me. So obviously that's it. So he said, you're right. So the mere fact that he brought these students was proof. But I knew it and I had it out with him. That you didn't think I was serious about this, did you? You didn't think much of me. I said, yeah, you're right. He didn't say I was wrong, but he brought his students, which was just as good.
And how did you go?
And he was very good, by the way. He was himself one of the best, I have to say that. He was very creative, very good. I have lots of good students. So, yeah.
But what of, when you look at the way Moreno directed and the way you started directing?
What is the difference?
Yes.
I think, well, the first thing is Moreno was very dramatic. I am much quieter as a director. I interview better than he does. That's quite clear when you see him. I think I give the protagonist a little more time and space to work out the situation. In other words, I stay back more. I introduced a number of things that he didn't use. I stopped recently, last few years, I stopped using the double so much because I want the protagonist to work hard and bring it up and, get it out of them themselves. Not to make it too easy for them. But we use the double. That a lot of directors may not pay attention to, or not enough. That is, in an ongoing group, you hear people share with others. And very often, exactly what they share is what they need to work on. In fact, I had one gal who came twice, and twice shared the same thing. Something that had happened to her so many years ago. And the third time, when she came, I asked her, I really have a question for you. I have now heard you say twice that something very unhappy happened to you so many years ago. Can we work on that? And she said, oh, I was going to work on the problem with my mother, but no, she said, let's work on that. Turned out to be one of the most beautiful transcendental sessions we had ever had here, because it was a man that she loved who had died when she was 19 years old. And the auxiliary was absolutely perfect. I tell you, we were absolutely breathless watching this going on. I mean, the room filled with the radiation from these two people. It wasn't so much what they said, but it was how they looked at each other. They'd never seen each other before, but they were transported. And that's what I like to see in psychodrama, when a protagonist is literally somewhere where they have needed to be and haven't been. It doesn't have to be something very practical. Just that cloud that was hanging over her for 30 years. And it was totally, this thing, the relationship, I mean, it was completed. So, sharing. And in the last group I had here, a couple of weekends ago, I did something I never did before. There were 4 people left who hadn't worked, and we had a time limitation. So I said, I know there are 4 people left, and I looked at each one and said, please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I got from you, what I see you need to do. You need to work on, is that correct? Yes. Good. You need to work on, correct? So this 4 times. So that I've never pointed out so clearly before. Listen to the sharing. And next time there is a group, if it reverberates in you, it reverberates from the protagonist. And you can pick it up and ask them for permission to work on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's entirely new. Because the only ongoing groups Moreno had were the patients in Beacon. And the only people who worked on the stage were patients, the others were students who were auxiliaries. So we worked in different dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing, if you hear a person share more than once the same story, that should ring a bell. Bell, ding.
I'm not sure that we have recorded the question I did to you, so I'm going to ask you again. What
Yes.
do you think that a director should never do?
They should never work on their own psychodrama. They should never project their psychodramatic needs on to the protagonist. You're going to hear that little clicking in the background. I hope that's all right. See, this hearing aid works.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
should
So
be-
you hear 100%.
there should be a distinct, this is not your psychodrama, even though it resembles some aspects of your own. This is the protagonist's psychodrama. Remember that space. It's their work you're working on, not yours. If you need to work on it, don't do it here, now. Find a group where you can do it. Don't mix your psychodrama with that psychodrama.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, my psychodramas work here in front of the light, in front of the shows, but we have projected the space out there today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. For technical reasons, because of the camera being there. So this is the space that we have projected. Now that you mentioned on the previously on open sessions, I got the impression that the open sessions in psychodrama historically were never very successful. Am I wrong? The impression
you're very wrong.
I'm wrong.
We had large groups.
But it didn't
No, I think
last
no.
for long time.
Oh, yes.
Yes?
Until I sold the building in New York, and then, before that, I began to do them in Beacon on Saturday nights, and I drew people from Connecticut, New Jersey, New York. They came from Brooklyn, they came from, oh no, we were very successful at that. And Moreno said we were doing, some ethicists have said it wasn't ethical. Moreno would say, we are doing a public mental health project. We are actually helping people's mental health. And it's more or less anonymous, because they come without a history and they leave, and they may never see each other again. And the other thing is that it was also educational, because
Mhm.
if we could do it, other people can do it. And I'll tell you, they're doing it now in London once a month.
Mhm.
They just got the announcement.
Now I remember from where I got this impression. I think that it was from the Vienna period.
Oh, that was different.
That
Yes,
yeah,
that was different.
that it was not that successful. They started doing open sessions. There were some people coming, but some actors
Actually,
coming.
they misunderstood the process.
Yes, and then they dropped. Yeah, so this came from this the biographer René Moreno.
René Moreno.
So in the States, it was very successful.
Oh yeah, the first people we drew were professionals. They were either, physicians, psychiatrists, psychotherapists, teachers, nurses, social workers, lawyers. They all came. Then gradually, the ordinary people from off the street walked in, especially when we were at 238 West 78th Street. They could just, at 101 Park Avenue, you had to take an elevator. But at West 78th Street, people walked off the street. One night we had 400 people in the building. JL worked downstairs, and I worked upstairs. And there wasn't a stage up there, but it was the same size room.
Mm-hmm.
400 people. It was a pretty solid building there.
How was that financially? Was it for free? People get to pay?
Nice question.
The financial part of it.
First, it was for free. And then the principal of a school who was began to use this in his school, by the way, role-playing with the students, said to Moreno, you come from Europe. You're not as business-oriented as Americans are. But I can tell you, in America, anything you get for free is not appreciated. Make them pay something. You won't believe, we started with 50 cents.
Mm.
We went on and on. We finished up by $5. The highest we ever charged was $5. So imagine we had repeaters in New York. Because one director came home, the student director came home to Beacon and said, you know what happened to me last night when I directed the session? A man came to me and said, thank you very much. And he said, but why? You never participated on the stage. He said, oh, I didn't need to. I've been coming for 2 years and I learned a lot. I don't need to come anymore. Therapy for $5. Pretty good, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it became worthwhile to charge people.
Talking about money, I have just read the French version, I don't know if it has already been translated, of Le Plaisir de Vivre.
Oh, that's our friend Anne Berger? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also a book of memoirs, and in the book she mentions a lot Moreno, but she mentions, as we talked about money, she mentions something about the fact that there was a difficulty when she had to help organizing a conference.
Yeah, at that one, the International Conference of Psychodrama, at the Faculté de Médecine. That's the one she organized.
The one, and was there any financial problem at that
if
time?
there was, I never found out about it. I never knew. She may well have had it. France is not the easiest place to organize anything like that.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, they're very much, in fact, for all their romanticism, they're actually very materialistic. So I wouldn't be at all surprised.
Yeah, she mentioned a financial problem that
Sure,
she had. But on the money side of it, was it worthy for Moreno, the whole coming to the United States, financially speaking? Was it fine, or at the end?
Well, there were many reasons why he came. He didn't come as a psychotherapist.
Mm-hmm.
He was given a contract for this radio film that he had designed. He became bored with it. He wanted to came back to New York. And he had to marry an American in order for his visa to
Mm-hmm.
So, did it come for the money? Yes, but he also came for freedom. This was 1925, and anti-Semitism was brewing in Austria. I don't know that it ever stopped, but it became very obvious. And after the Russian Revolution, and he says that in his memoirs, if you remember, he was thinking, I either have to go to Russia or to
Yeah.
America. And he was discouraged by going to Russia because some of his students tried to start improvisational theater and was stopped. So they came back to Vienna. So he realized that no, that was no go. America was a place for him to come. And also, I think, you know, America was, still is, for some people, promise, hope, freedom. Although, definitely, all that promise and hope and freedom has been debased somewhat. But there's still people who come, people for whom that exists because where they are is so totally miserable. Anything would be better than where they are. And America is a lot better than that.
But Zerka, at the end, the Beacon experience, was it financially successful?
Well, it helped me to retire.
Uh-huh.
Oh, you mean the sale of the place, or do you mean my
No,
running?
no.
Running
From running.
Oh, no. If I hadn't gone abroad to lecture and work, I couldn't have sustained Beacon. And that was the problem. I was getting older, and to carry, for a place to be carried on my earnings, that couldn't go on forever. So when we were offered to sell it, I was 65, was just the right moment. And that helped secure my income.
Yeah. Well, let's go back now to the...
But actually, it wasn't so much only the institute. It was also these beautiful environment. I mean, we had a gorgeous place it was good acreage there. And so it became, eventually, a developer came and built houses on our land. You saw the houses.
Yeah, I did.
They weren't there until just before I sold the building, just after I sold the building. So.
Yeah. Now, coming back to the director part of it.
Yeah.
Is it something that you, because of the fact that you took a very long period before directing, is it something that you advise people to go before taking the direction?
Look, let me say this. Mine was a unique situation. I worked with a master, side by side. And I mean, I think that the learning happened almost by osmosis. I absorbed the entire atmosphere of the place. That's unique. That cannot be replicated by anyone. The American Board of Examiners has set the number of hours people need. So my answer is, it isn't so much the amount of time. It is how you feel as a director. Do you feel competent? And that maybe you may need more or you may need less. But no one has ever had, and will ever have, what I had.
Yeah.
So I'm a poor example for the current, training kind of period. And don't forget, I was also living in his shadow. I had to make my own place as well. It wasn't just simply that I was working with him. I had to make I had to establish my own identity in this. To this day, when people quote Moreno, they leave me out of the bibliography for volume 2 and 3, and I write to the publisher and say, this is happening all the time. I don't think they see the books because it's right there on the cover, right on the cover. They are quoting somebody else who also hasn't seen the book. And I want you to correct that. And they do, usually with a, I just got one from Zoli Figush, who is a Hungarian who grew up in Brazil and lives in England. And he translated some of the Brazilian works into English. He did the same thing, and I immediately, and of course it's on the computer, I immediately told him, Zoli, it's not correct. You've got to correct that, your next copies. So I had to establish my own identity. There were people who came who didn't even know I existed. In fact, one young man said, "What are you doing here?" I'm telling you.
Where?
Well, that was in the 60s. I was
Uh-huh.
already well established. What are you doing here? He wanted to be where I was, clearly. He was mad. He was completely mad.
Was fashion totally over after the psychodrama, the meeting Moreno? Fashion, because you were in the fashion world.
By that time, I had given up fashion design. I knew that wasn't practical. I had to make a living. I learned shorthand and typing, and I became a secretary. You'll read it all in my book. Don't worry about it. That's in there. Those are not the important things that we need to focus on. That was pre-psychodrama period.
Uh-huh. Well, fine. So let's move then to if the director's part is already covered. So let's move to the protagonist.
But what about the protagonist?
Well, you mentioned that the protagonist is needs the director, otherwise he will never.
They come to psychodrama because they have no direction
Yeah.
in their life.
Mm.
That's very clear. And because, there's something else. Because psychodrama is an expanding world. Their lives are fairly narrow. And once you work in psychodrama, life changes. It's not only that you expand, the world expands for you. That's why people are so fascinated by it.
And why we take, for instance, protagonist and we don't talk about antagonist?
I'm very glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the very things I have complained about in the German literature, that they use that word. Why? We're not a military organization. This is not a battle we're doing. I just told you about this girl with the boyfriend she lost. Was he an antagonist? Is talking with your mother about your rights being antagonistic? It is establishing your rights. Moreno never used that word. Don't forget, we are working on relationships. How can you build a relationship with an antagonist? Besides, this auxiliary ego is putting themselves at your service. Is that an antagonist?
Mm.
He gives you his hand, you give, the protagonist takes a hand and said, "Come into my world." Is that antagonism? That's entirely false, that concept. It has no relationship to psychodrama.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wrote an article, a note about that to people, to the Germans. It's hateful. It doesn't belong. You've been protagonist. Have
Yeah.
you felt other people as in your drama as antagonists?
No.
Of course not. There are other people you're trying to relate to, for God's sake. That should be scrapped. No way.